My guest tonight is Patrick McKnight. He's a libertarian running for Montgomery's Township Committee. Patrick, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
So just tell me a bit about Montgomery Township.
Montgomery Township is just north of Princeton. It is a town of about 24,000 people. It incorporates the towns of Skillman and Belmead. And the reason I'm running is because property taxes are so high that it's pretty much impossible to either retire there or start a family there if you're a young person.
So you're running on, this idea of lower taxes, individual liberty, and limited government. Could you tell me a bit more about those ideas?
So in Montgomery Township, the average property tax is $15,000 a year. So over the course of 10 years, if taxes don't go up, which they always do, you'll be paying $150,000 just to live in your own home. That's pretty difficult to do if you're not some type of millionaire. And so what I've seen over the course of my life is most of the people who've lived there for generations have had to leave Montgomery, probably leave the state, move to Pennsylvania or to another state where it's much more affordable. New Jersey right now is number one in the country for emigration, for people leaving the state, and I think it's because of the cost of living. So the only way to reduce taxes is to reduce spending. So we need to look at the budget and realize that the role of government isn't necessarily to do as much as it's doing right now. I think we're asking government to do too much. I think it's actually unfair. I don't think that's what government is for. I think the role of government is to protect people's liberty.
So on that note, why does Montgomery Township, certain ways politics in general, need a libertarian candidate?
Well, we've had this two-party system for over 100 years, and the founders didn't really want to have partisan politics. It's not part of the Constitution. They rallied very hard against having political parties, and basically the way it works now is both parties are funded by a lot of the same people, a lot of the same special interest groups. And so there's no real independent voice. I mean, you look at the Republicans, you look at the Democrats, and I think there's a lot of good people in both of those organizations, especially at the local level. But once you get up to the top, there's so much money involved that the Wall Street interests, like the J.P. Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, all these big money people, they really are able to manipulate the system. And so what I think libertarians can do, we're the third largest, we're the fastest growing party. And even if we can't win those big elections because we don't have the money, what we can do is we can change the conversation. We can interject some fresh ideas, and the other parties will either have to respond to us or incorporate some of the things we're saying, or we're going to continue to grow, in which case we will be able to win those bigger elections down the road.
So, also on that note, is it safe to assume that you'll be voting for Gary Johnson this election?
Yes, definitely.
Could you tell us a bit what you're really thinking about this kind of very crazy election's only a few days away?
Yeah. I mean, this election is really crazy. I mean, I think at a certain level, it's sort of a distraction because if either Trump or Clinton wins, I don't see the general downward trajectory of the country and the political climate changing. It's probably just going to get worse, whichever of them win. And I don't see any, despite all the, the language that's thrown back and forth, I don't see much substantive difference in a lot of their policies. And it's sort of symbolic of the whole two-party system. It's not choice, it's the illusion of choice. I mean, the Trumps and the Clintons have been friends for a long time. They've been business partners. And now all of a sudden, supposedly, they're these big enemies. I don't know. I see it more as theater. And I think there's a lot of really important things that aren't getting discussed because we're spending all this time in this he said, she said thing. And it's just really a distraction.
I guess a question that I really have for lots of people who come on the show and talk about politics is, how did you really come into your own and realize that this Libertarian Party and that running for office in general was something that you wanted to do?
So when I was in high school, that's when the Iraq War was getting started and the Patriot Act was passed, and I was very passionately against both of those things. Which at the time, it's sort of hard to remember now, but right after 9/11, if you came out against the war or the Patriot Act, I mean, you people said some very mean things about you. But at that time, so I thought that made me a liberal, or maybe like a leftist Democrat. And then once the Democrats got into power, of course, it was business as usual. So there was a brief period of time where I thought maybe I would associate with the Green Party. But I think what really made me realize that I was a libertarian is when my first job after I graduated Rutgers as an undergrad was I did Teach for America in Camden, and I taught high school social studies. And I looked at the amount of money that's been spent trying to help Camden and cities like Camden, and I look at the quality of life that people have in those communities, and it's very hard for me to draw any sort of correlation between an increase in a lot of these welfare programs and actual increase in anyone's quality of life. So that made me really take a step back, and also the 2008 crisis, I think for a lot of people, I wanted to understand what was happening to the economy. So I spent quite a few years really focusing on economics, and through that process, I really came to identify as a libertarian, also because at the same time the whole Ron Paul movement was happening, and I was a big Ron Paul person, and I got to meet him a couple times. I actually saw him again when he was here at Rutgers in January or February. So all those things sort of happened at once, and that made me realize that you can have all sorts of programs, and having great intentions is fantastic, but if you don't have results, those programs aren't sustainable. So that's really what made me a libertarian.
So this isn't your first campaign. I see you've run for Congress before and state representative as well. How were those campaigns?
So running for Congress, even state assembly, you need so much money to compete. To run for Congress, you really need about $1 million to even get in the ballpark. And so as a libertarian, we don't have any of those special interests funding us. We're funded just about 100% by our members. So that's one of the great things about us, is we have no corruption because we don't have that influence of those special interest groups. Well, when I ran for Congress, that's sort of how, it was almost by accident, because I went to a town hall meeting with Congressman Lance right after he voted for the indefinite detention of American citizens at the end of 2011, and I had never even seen a politician in real life before. I always followed it, but the first time I went to a town hall, and he's up there talking about how he's a strong supporter of the Constitution, and I raised my hand and asked him a question, and I said, look, you just voted for the indefinite detention of American citizens. If you're a strong supporter of the Constitution, what does a weak supporter look like? And he had nothing to say. He really embarrassed himself, and it was caught on camera, and then it went on the internet, and a few thousand people saw it, and it was almost this accidental thing that got me involved. And after the meeting, there were as many people wanted to talk to me as wanted to talk to him. So and it showed me that there's a lot of people out there who feel disenfranchised and are very unhappy with the way things are, but they all feel like they're the only ones. And what I learned going door to door was that everybody feels that way, but we no longer communicate to our neighbors. We've lost a lot of our sense of community. We don't get together as citizens like we used to. So we all feel isolated, like we're the only ones that feel this way, but really the vast majority of Americans feel this way.
I also do need to ask about, you were in the band
Yes.
Dinosaur Island, and you're still in the band, right?
Yes.
Still running, but you're also in the band as well.
Yes.
How was balancing those two things going for you?
Well, we're finishing up our 5th album right now. I was just in the studio on Tuesday, and we're finishing up the mixes, and hopefully we'll have the masters done by the end of the year. So it should be out early next year. And we will be performing here at Overnight Sensations in January, and we'll be performing at John and Peters in New Hope, Pennsylvania in December for our annual ALS benefit. But I definitely I have a lot on my plate. I'm very busy. A lot of people tell me I'm too busy, but I'm passionate about a lot of things, and what I love about music, in a way, I love music more than I love politics, because I feel music brings people together in a positive way. And a lot of times with politics, no matter what your platform is, I mean, you could have the best, purest platform, objectively speaking, in the world, and there will just be people who come at you with pure negativity just because you're up there on the stage. So music, it's different. It sort of brings people together in a positive way, where sometimes politics just brings out the worst in people, and that's my least favorite thing about politics.
And my final question is one that people have been hearing a lot, especially in the last few days, but it's something I always like to drive the point home, especially when it comes to local elections. Why is it important to get out there and vote in not just the presidential election, but congressional, state representative, and town council?
Well, you look at all the numbers, and people are very unhappy with the direction of the country. You have Congress has a 10% approval rating, but they also have a 90% reelection rate. And everybody says they want to have term limits, but everybody keeps reelecting their congressman. So I think it's important to vote, and I really encourage people to look at the third parties, whether they're libertarian or Greens or independents, because as long as you keep voting for the lesser of two evils, you're going to end up with some form of evil. And I think we deserve better than that. And it's important to educate yourself as a citizen and to empower yourself. And really, voting is just the first step. I think people really need to get involved and take more responsibility as citizens. Really, in our form of government, we're supposed to be the first branch. We're supposed to be the sovereigns, and we just sort of have the government do a few things for us with our permission, and we've lost sight of that. And now we think the government is there and supposed to take care of us, and that's not sustainable. We need to embrace the responsibility we have as citizens, or else we're going to end up without any liberty. And that was the whole point of the American experiment, was to have a country founded in liberty. So if we want that for our kids, we have to get involved.
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, it was great having you on the show. And just as a reminder, everyone, get out there and vote November 8th on every election you can get your hands on. It really, really does make the difference. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ryan.